Hey, ELD with Brainstorm MTG, and we have something special for you this week. This is filmed from Gaming Etc. at their Tuesday night Legacy event, and actually went mobile here using my cell phone as a webcam, trying something different. So this is a mobile attempt, and we will be trying this out at some other stores as we try and refine it. So, starting right out of the gate, Storm versus Sneak and Show. Had no idea what Oren was on. And starting out with the Gitaxian Probe, and perfect information has been attained. And what a filthy hand he has. Looks like Lotus Petal, Ancient Tomb, Show and Tell, Omniscience, Emrakul, and Gristlebrand. That is a turn 1 on Oren's side of the board, but I did win the die roll, and we'll see if there's anything that can be done to prevent certain death. We've got a Lotus Petal into Dark Ritual, double Lion's Eye Diamond, so all the mana in the world here, and we'll see what there is to go along with it. It looks like Infernal Tutor, so there we go. No counter magic in Oren's hand. Lion's Eye Diamond being sacked in response. We'll see if both of them get sacked. So no lands so far from Storm. One of the few decks in the format that can actually win without playing any lands. And in this instance, we see there's actually 9 mana that have been generated without a single land drop. Dark Ritual, Lotus Petal, double LED. Looks like the storm count marching up there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Storm count of 6. And checking to see here. Looks like those Infernal Tutors in the graveyard. Very, very powerful. They can go ahead and get a Cabal Ritual or Lion's Eye Diamond. And both of those plays will net an additional mana. It's an important thing to remember if you're piloting Storm, that those excess tutors are actually basically Lotus Petals in their net effect. Of course, it actually adds 2 Storms, so better than being able to just, say, replay a Lotus Petal. And here we go, Dark Ritual again into Infernal. Of course, still hellbent, having sacked those LEDs, getting rid of those last couple of pesky, unusable cards. Lion's Eye Diamond is such an important part of this deck. The only format where you can play it as a 4-of. And there we go, the second Infernal for a Tendrils of Agony, and that is game 1. So what a huge difference going first made there. Both decks unbelievably powerful. Either one would have had a first turn win, and Storm happened to be on the play there, robbing Sneak and Show of one of the best possible openings it could have. Now post-board, this is a really interesting matchup. Storm a little bit faster. Of course, it has discard to protect itself, whereas the Sneak and Show list has counter magic. So you're looking at Force of Will, Spell Pierce, Flusterstorm, potentially Red Blast. There's a lot of possibilities from the Sneak and Show side of the table in terms of how it's going to defend itself. That does make Cabal Therapy a little bit dicier when you're trying to guess. So Gitaxian Probe, very important. And of course, how those kind of line up is very interesting. The counter magic can really hit the bottleneck for the Storm deck. So a lot of the time you're all in on a Infernal Tutor or a Dark Petition, or even just a hand where a Lion's Eye Diamond is absolutely essential. There's so many different linchpins. There are times where you can just cut people out from their even climbing that ladder by removing the bottom rung and just stopping those rituals, stranding them with a card like Dark Petition in hand with no way of getting to that 5 mana. So the counter magic, very challenging to play around, varied, so Cabal Therapy isn't able to just say blindly name Force of Will and know that you're in the clear because there are other powerful counters in the format. However, versus Sneak and Show, I find that discard is at its best. So not only are you able to get rid of their counter magic, which is your general plan A with your discard spells, but if they don't have the counter magic, you're still going to greatly disrupt their plan. And that's a big difference in between playing against Storm and playing against Sneak and Show compared to playing against something like, say, Check Pile, where a Duress against that deck, if they don't have counter magic, could very often be really underwhelming. Maybe you'll grab a Kolaghan's Command or a Lightning Bolt, something where you really aren't happy that you wasted your mana and your card to get. And the shields may be down, but perhaps you're not able to capitalize on it. But their game plan is just going to keep moving forward, which is generally them attacking with creatures and keeping a board presence. So because Sneak and Show generally doesn't do anything on the board until it's actually winning, those discard spells, I think, at their best in this type of matchup. Either clearing the way, getting rid of the counters, or actually impeding their plan in a meaningful way. And we're going to be going to game 2, possibly 3. Definitely want to hear feedback from all you guys on this new setup. This is, as I said, shot on a cell phone. It looks to be a little wiggly so far. So maybe able to come up with a different tripod setup, different angles. There's all sorts of possibilities here. And of course, anybody with any AV experience, any input's more than welcome, really from anybody, any good idea, regardless of where it comes from. And it looks like Oren drawing a hand with a Force of Will and some mana. Let's see if that's good enough on his side. Being on the play this game. Show and Tell, a big part of the equation. Griselbrand, of course, very strong to get into play versus Storm, and that you can just draw into those fistfuls of counters. And it can also be a response to an activation like Tendrils or an all-in play. So even if you have no counters in hand because of discard spells, you can still draw 7 to 14 cards and presumably draw that counter. So Griselbrand, certainly at his just about his finest in this type of matchup. Whereas some other decks, you might not be thrilled to just Show and Tell a Griselbrand in. Against Storm, it is totally fine. A deck like Death and Taxes is generally going to shrug that off and return it with Karakas, Swords of Plowshares. There's just so many different answers for it. Very often you're unable to respond because they have a Thalia out. So the Storm matchup, you're really going to be happy putting in Griselbrand. On the flip side of that, you're not going to be very happy putting in Emrakul off of a Show and Tell because passing the turn is an eternity in this format. Giving Storm a whole extra turn when you've deprived yourself of the Show and Tell mana means it's very likely that you'll just die with that Eldrazi Titan just sitting on your side of the battlefield. And both players going to 6. While the mulligans are happening here, I'd like to thank Michelle and Gaming Etc. for allowing us to film and broadcast this. They've been tremendous supporters of Eternal formats, both Vintage and Legacy, and they're actually doing 93-94 as well, which I hope to get down for one of those events. And here we go. Looks like we've got a couple of 6-card hands. Both combo decks generally want to have as many cards as possible, of course, but they are capable of getting the job done with relatively few cards. Storm a little bit more resilient in that regard. And I can make out a Force of Will, a Show and Tell. We do have some glare over there, so that City of Traders having been played first. Another Probe going to 16. So building a Storm count here on the first turn. Of course, there is a Force of Will over there, so perhaps just digging. And there's the Duress. So Duress is taking Force of Will, and we've got Griselbrand, Show and Tell, and perhaps Emrakul. So a land coming off the top will be spectacular, but no land to be found. So very tense game state here. Any colored mana source. Oh, and Cabal Therapy. Just sweeping the legs out from underneath Oren there. So now he needs to draw a Show and Tell and a mana source. Of course, still has Griselbrand and Emrakul. We've got a Can't tell what that is. That's an invocation. Trying to think of what invocations could actually be played. I guess there's Stifle. I think there might be Spell Pierce. I'm going to assume it's some type of counter. Of course, Force of Will was printed as an invocation, but he has the beautiful Therese Nielsen art for his set of forces. Such an iconic card. And a Lotus Petal. So both decks restricted on mana so far. Ponder coming down. That Lotus Petal signaling something's up. You don't generally see the Lotus Petal just jammed prior to building a storm count. So a little suspicious there. And passing back, Oren just bricking on land after land here. He really just needs to draw one. So, oh, here we go. We've got City of Traders into a foil Expedition Scalding Tarn. That is... Oh, but not actually able to show and tell off of it. Very interesting. So that must be like a Spell Pierce or a 1 blue counter spell, valuing getting that online more than being able to ramp up to 3 mana off of a show and tell when he finally draws it. Taking a more defensive posture here, which is not unwise versus a deck like Storm. If there are no counter spells available there, then Storm will just run right over you. Even from a position of so little mana, as we saw in Game 1, literally didn't even have a land drop. And it looks like some decisions to be made here. 2 unknown cards. And a Duress. And we are going to see a Spell Pierce. Those invocations had some really beautiful art, and of course such a small amount of the talk was about that art. The rest of it was really about the border and the titles, but there was some really beautiful art commissioned for those, and they just were not really that well received. They are certainly unique, though. Alright, so life totals remaining relatively high, as they will in these type of matchups for the most part. Generally, all of the life being taken in a single flourish of either giant monsters attacking or a whole whirling of spells ending in a Tendrils, or perhaps an Empty the Warrens. Alright, Lion's Eye Diamond. Tapping Underground Sea. We are likely to see something here. There's an Infernal Tutor in hand. So it's Dark Ritual to join it, and just passing, so kind of losing on a storm count. It looked like perhaps the plan changed after counting up some cards. We've got Dark Ritual and Ad Nauseam in hand as well. And there is that Infernal Tutor, so the lot of unknown cards now on Owen's side. Have to assume that some of them are going to be counter spells. Cards like Spell Pierce, Flusterstorm, Force of Will. They're certainly not lands. And there is a Ponder. So it looks like going to try and find a Gitaxian Probe or a counter or a discard spell to at least get some knowledge of what to play around. There's been so many turns have passed since that last arrest. And looks like a Gitaxian Probe was found. The fetch land shuffling away those other 3 cards, which were not going to be good enough. And the Gitaxian Probe looks to get perfect information and a fresh random card. At this point, we're going to be either looking for discard spells or just some additional mana to make sure that there's enough mana to go through with a lethal combo. And it looks like all sorts of goodness here. A Show and Tell, a Flusterstorm, and a Force of Will to contend with. So 2 counter spells. So perhaps holding on after playing that Lion's Eye Diamond the correct line, because the shields are most certainly not down here. And we have a Ponder. So Ponder just really needs to find a soul land, Show and Tell into Emrakul, or into Griselbrand. Oh, there we've got another land, so we've got to assume there's another land coming off the top of the deck next turn. So we could see a lot of different lines. We've got Show and Tell for Emrakul, Griselbrand, or Sneak Attack. So Sneak Attack with a soul land would allow for 1 activation, and that could be the safer line in terms of getting Emrakul and wrecking the board on the other side. But, oh, we've got another Cabal Therapy. Good timing on that. The next turn, almost certainly a land. So we are going to be facing down Show and Tell if this therapy resolves. It will probably take the Show and Tell. If it doesn't, you might be looking at taking the Flusterstorm and then forcing the Show and Tell player to use Force of Will on a bait spell. There are just times where Storm has 2 different lines, or a line that involves 2 must-counter spells. If they can't counter them both, then you just win anyways. This may be one of those spots. So Flusterstorm out of the way. Peculiar, really, really interesting lines here. So we've got the Show and Tell down to just Force in terms of blue cards. So this, in a Flusterstorm from Storm. So that is easily going to counter the Show and Tell. That does explain some of those previous decisions. And it looks like just Force of Will with no blue cards. So the shields are down. And we've got an Infernal Tutor. And it's revealing Dark Ritual, indicating that there's more than 1 tutor in hand. And this should be it right here. Perfect information gained. Lotus Petal, Storm Count rising, Dark Ritual, going to 5 black mana, rapidly building a Storm Count. That count likely to be irrelevant here. Got to imagine that a Past in Flames is incoming. That would be the fastest line here. Of course, you want to stay away from Ad Nauseam whenever you can. You generally are just going to be able to shock on the wind. Oh, and a Past in Flames already in hand. So this Infernal likely to just get a Cabal Ritual. That can be played before flashing back Past in Flames. Past in Flames, such a powerful card in a control matchup. When they're trying to counterspell that final card, there are times where you're able to generate enough mana that they have to counterspell Past in Flames twice, and sometimes are not able to stop the flashback. In this instance, no counters there, so Past in Flames allows the flashback of all of those mana sources, the Cabal Rituals and the Dark Rituals, and Infernal into Tendrils, and that is it. So that was a very kind of interesting matchup there. Flusterstorm not allowing for a particularly smooth game by Storm, but it did do its job. Gotta think it might be better off as just an additional discard spell. We'll see how that plays for the rest of the evening. But that is it for round 1. This has been ELD with Brainstorm MTG. Thanks for watching.